Hello, friends. My name is Steve, and today we are talking with author Todd Hosea.
Hosea.
Hosea, geez. And you just told me how to pronounce it, and I screwed it up. Sorry. But thank you for joining me. Sorry for all the back and forth, but I'm glad we can finally meet up.
For sure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's great to finally meet you. And before we start, I just want to say thank you for your service as a veteran. Appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you. It was fun to be able to take some of my experience and put it into these books. So I look forward to talking about it with you.
Yeah, it's actually one of my first questions I had written down for you was, how did your time in the service shape you and your creative process?
Yeah, well, writing is something that I've always done. In fact, started writing in high school, and then actually while I was in the Air Force, kept developing this sci-fi fantasy book, and finished it at one point many years later. But at the end of it, I didn't really like it, and I decided I knew I could do better, so I've kind of shelved it. But I hope to come back to it in the future. But while I was in the Air Force, was a great experience for me, and I encourage anyone who's really kind of looking for a direction. You can learn a career. You can learn a lot of valuable life skills while you're in, and it was a very positive experience for me, and I used that time not only to pursue some of my creative interests like writing, but also, I went to school during that time, so there was a lot of I had some flexibility and took advantage of all that stuff. So, and it's just fun that as we talk about Steal the Reaper and Hunt the Reaper, how those military experiences came back, and I was able to apply some of that time in the military into these books.
Was there a specific anything specific that you were surprised that you used in your writing that you had experience with?
I was stationed at Peterson Air Force Base in Colorado Springs. It's actually Space Force Base now. But my time there, I was able to put some information into the first book, and regarding the tracking of an alien spacecraft that eventually crashes in North Korea, and how it was tracked by the U.S. military. And that really was the premise that kind of got me going with that story. When I got the original idea for Steal the Reaper, with the idea that there's been talk in the news, about UFOs and everything, and government cover up and all that. That's nothing new, but when I got the idea for Steal the Reaper, the first thought that I had was, how would the world really respond to an alien spacecraft coming to Earth? And so I wanted to be as accurate as possible, and also honor our military in the way that I write, so that I'm trying to be very detailed about, whether it's the USS Anchorage, or we're talking about Space Command, different military groups, and trying to honor their service, what they do on a day in and day out basis. And so, when you read Steal the Reaper, it's very much a political thriller. And, I grew up reading Tom Clancy and Michael Crichton. So those techno thriller writers were big influences on me. And that's kind of was able to mesh that with my own military experience and love for the genre.
It does surprise me how much of this new, like the UFO stuff, is like starting to be public, and no one seems to be like concerned about it. It seems kind of strange.
Yeah,
but no, that's a great idea.
Funny because right after Steal the Reaper came out, there was a an incident in Hawaii of a UFO, and that happens in my book where the aliens
Hmm.
part of the alien spacecraft goes down just off the coast of Kauai, and the same thing happened literally like 2 months after my book came out. And I was getting emails from family, and everybody's like, "You knew, you know," that kind of funny thing. But
So the Reaper series is it's a 4 book series, right? It's planned for 4 books.
right, yeah. So book one, Steal the Reaper, came out in October of 20, and then Hunt the Reaper came out earlier this year, and then my plan is to have book three out next year, and then
Hmm.
eventually book four. Yeah.
Do you have the whole? Because I know you like this from your bio. You like to outline and plot. Do you have the whole series planned?
You know, the funny thing is when I wrote Steal the Reaper, it was intended to just be a standalone, and
Hmm.
I just wanted to prove to myself that I could write and publish a book. And but I just came to love these characters, and I planted enough, seeds for other. I don't want to say spin-offs, but I think just the way I planted enough in book one that there was more to tell. And certainly book one ends not as a cliffhanger, but I hope that it leaves the reader wanting more and that there is more
Hmm.
to come. And yet you could just read it alone and be happy with that book by itself. But after I finished it and it was published, I, I was just ready to jump back in with these characters. And that's where, to me, the challenge was, especially writing science fiction, there's a lot of world building that needs to take
Hmm.
place. And so that was like the biggest challenge for me was to really push my imagination to create a unique alien world and everything about them. And I approached the alien world the same way I did the military on Earth, as I wanted to be accurate and realistic so that people could relate to that culture and the environment and everything from how does light work
Hmm.
underwater and on this alien world. And so I enjoyed getting into those nuances, but I always try to not get too buried in details that it slows down the book or the plot. And so I try to keep the story moving very quickly, but I think there's enough there to give the reader to, to spark their own imagination and let them visualize where they're at and what's happening. And um, so that was a fun part of book two. So.
Hmm. You mentioned world building. What's your approach to building a world? I'm always amazed about how much goes into even like how light works underwater.
Mm-hmm.
And that could have been an afternoon or a whole day for you, but it's just a small piece in the book. What it always amazes me how much world building goes in that the reader doesn't see, but you know.
Yeah, and it's funny because you know I've listened to podcasts and read articles of other authors, and one of the pitfalls of authors is you do all this research that you hope to put into a book that never makes it in, and so you waste a lot of time. I don't want to say waste. There's probably good things that come out of it, but you spend so much time researching instead of writing, and
Hmm.
that is something that, especially with the first book, what helped me finish it was just this mantra that don't try to make every word perfect. Don't try to, get it all right the first time. The most important thing is just push through and get this story written and then go back and edit it and fine tune it. And, you do that over and over and over again. But I think that pushing through like that really helped me, and I did that with the second book as well. Is
Mm.
I didn't try to get too deep into the details, because then you kind of lose your rhythm writing. So I did enough to kind of get myself through the entire book, and then through a lot of revisions fine tuned it, and it's a lot easier at that point, because then you have something to work with, and you can start molding your story, and it helps to spark your own imagination. But also, I would recommend to any author, new author especially, um, some of the best advice I got was, you don't always have to spend your time writing to learn your craft. And so I grew up. I wasn't a big reader. I was big into art and
Mm.
movies, and so Star Wars and The Empire Strikes Back were huge influences on me, and visually. And so whenever I hit I just don't feel like writing, I can still watch a movie or TV show or whatever, and study the character
Mm.
development that's taking place, study the dialogue, pay attention to the environment, and picking up little nuances of how which direction bubbles go underwater or something, something crazy like that. But it's just something that helps you think, and hopefully you store it in the back of your mind, and it comes out when you're doing your own writing. And so
Mm. When you look back, when you think back on movies that you've watched that have helped you with character development or world building, are there any that stand out to you that you can look back on and say, this movie, I learned something from it or something important for you?
for sure, well, certainly Star Wars and Star Trek were big for me on the sci-fi side. But I mean, I love all movies, and Dances with Wolves is a
Mm.
favorite of mine. Um, let's see, just like last night, I went to go see a new movie called The Iron Claw, which is a
Mm.
brilliant movie, and I highly recommend it. I didn't grow up as a wrestling fan, but to watch the story and the relationship between these brothers and their father, um, during the 70s when wrestling was kind of growing popular. It's just a
Mm.
fascinating movie. I highly recommend it. But just, it could be anything. Watching a documentary, you can learn things, or even video games. Um, there's uh, there's a game. I don't know if you're a gamer or not, but there's one called. It's a Star Wars game called. Um, Jedi Survivor is like the sequel. I'm trying to.
Mm.
Fallen Order was the first game, and I just love that game because um, you're basically exploring all these different worlds. And so, even as I was playing this game, I was taking notes on the jungle environment, or a major. When you think of Blade Runner and those type of what do they call that?
Like
Um,
dystopian.
yeah, that kind of environment, rainy and neon
Mm.
lights and everything. So just any situation, whether again, looking at a TV show, or even a painting in a museum, just kind of thinking and imagining that environment is where I draw inspiration.
It's always interesting to me that the authors I talk to who don't read a whole lot, but more are inspired by movies or TV shows, how their writing style tends to be more visual. It tends to be more action packed, I guess. Like, I don't want to say necessarily fast moving, but it has a different pace, a different feel to it.
Yeah, and I think that is exactly how I write. I grew up, like I said, reading Tom Clancy, and he could spend 100 pages talking about how to build a nuclear bomb, and it's a lot of good information, but at times it can slow things down. And I don't mean that to sound sacrilegious, because I love Tom Clancy, but it just I think that one of the compliments I got on Steal the Reaper was that it was like a movie in the reader's mind, and I think that's exactly how I think and how I write is. It's very much, I'm thinking more of it as a movie than I would a literary masterpiece. I'm not trying to woo the reader with fancy words and um, unnecessary description. I would rather just tell the story, and let them connect the dots in their own mind. As long as they can relate to the story, it's amazing, I think, how much our brain just kind of fills in the gaps. And there are some authors. I love James Rollins and Ken Follett. Those, and J.K. Rowling is another favorite of mine. So there are some authors that just are just their wordsmithing is so great compared to mine. But I think that I do enough to keep the reader interested and understand conflict, as well as, I always try to end a chapter with the reader wanting more. So
Mm.
it's not just the end of a chapter. It's like it's the end, but I want you to jump to the next chapter and keep going. So I always try to keep the story moving that way.
Hmm. I do think that's I appreciate that, because there's chapter links are I can't stop reading unless I'm at the end of a chapter.
Hmm.
So it's always nice to have that little cliffhanger at the end.
Hmm.
When you decided to publish a book, and you looked into self publishing, what was the biggest surprise that you ran, or the biggest obstacle you ran into?
Wow. We could spend a whole day talking about
Yeah,
that.
it's a
I
big
had
topic.
no idea what I was getting into. And honestly, when I finished the book, the first book, I was doing research on, how to go about getting published. And my intent was to get traditionally published. But then as I started, doing more research and discovering, how much, you know, I, I didn't want to give up the rights to my book, and I didn't want to wait years to get published and going through the whole rejection process. Um, and I wanted to do my own cover art. I
Mm-hmm.
enjoy graphic design, and so
Mm.
I enjoy actually the process after the writing is done. I enjoy building the book and doing the art and building the interior. So, I went for it and decided that, I'm kind of betting on myself to get, because not only are you're self publishing, but then you're having to market it yourself. And,
Mm-hmm.
and that's where I think I took my natural, um, uh, path, I think, was, I wrote Steal the Reaper with wanting to honor our military, not just in being accurate, but also I remember being an enlisted airman sitting in a shack in Iceland in the middle of winter, snowbanks covering all sides of my little. Think of the Kurt Russell movie, The Thing. You think about the ice, and how the wind would blow it up and against the sides of the building and everything. And it's just sitting out there. And I got so much, the good thing, there's nobody else around, so you don't have to worry about really any threats. But it was an opportunity to study if I was going to college or to work on my book. And so, anyway, I forget where I was going with that, but back to the self-publishing. It was, so when I decided that I could do what was necessary. Oh, I remember where I was going. So getting back to honoring the military, after the book came out, one of the first things I did was reach out to Fort Knox in
Hmm.
Kentucky, and they helped me get a vendor's license so that I could visit military bases and do book signings there. And so, I wanted to go straight to my target audience.
Hmm.
And, but I think that, you learn so many lessons along the way about not just learning how to be a good writer, but also how to, try to, as an independent author, how to do it cheap so that you can be profitable. And so there's so much to learn. There are different services out there, a lot of scams. That
Hmm.
was the thing to really, if anybody's listening that is looking to self-publish, really do your research, because there are a lot of scams out there where um, they're just wanting to get your money, and there's no guarantee that your books are going to sell. So just be
Hmm.
really cautious about um, going the self-publishing route. And if you're willing to wait and really put in the hard work to try to get traditionally published, and you're, like I said, you're willing to wait and be patient about it, certainly pursue that avenue as well. But
Hmm.
nowadays it's so easy to self-publish, but now we're dealing with AI, and the market is just getting flooded with books, and so it's very hard to get noticed in that sea of options. So,
Yeah, I think it's interesting that a lot of people think, well, I have a publisher, I don't have to worry about anything. But a lot of publishers now depend on authors to do their own marketing, and you do a lot of the work you would do anyway if you just self publish and just bypass the publisher and avoid all that hassle and time.
exactly. I think the only thing that really, I would say, bothers me, but I think that there's a lot of truth to it, is you know uh, there's a stigma towards self-published authors and the quality of the work, and I get that, because honestly, anyone could go self-publish today. They could just write a bunch of gibberish and publish it on Amazon. Um, but there's some bookstores that I work with
Hmm.
that don't look at self-published authors, just for the very reason of the quality of the product. And so you have to have some salesmanship and show them that you have a quality book, and and try to win them over. So there's
Hmm.
certainly some challenges being a self-published author, and like you said, even if you go the traditional route, you're still expected to market it and be actively engaged in trying to promote it.
Yeah, it's a lot of work either way.
Hmm.
On your website, you mentioned that it's your least favorite part, the marketing part of it. What tips would you give to someone who not sure where to start with marketing?
Well, and I don't mean to sound cynical. I think in the before my first book came out, I think it was a whole lot easier to get reviews on,
Hmm.
say, Amazon. And I think that Amazon has really clamped down on that, because they really don't
Hmm.
want bogus reviews out there. And so I find getting reviewers is challenging. I
Hmm.
haven't put a lot of effort into trying to get reviews. I just wanted it to just happen organically. But at some point, you really need to pay attention to that, because it's perception. And if
Yeah.
people perceive that you don't have a lot of reviews, then maybe it's not worth spending their money on. And I get that. So I am trying to focus more on trying to get reviews now. But that's just something that a new independent author should be mindful of, is even after your book is built, if you hire somebody to build your book for you and to do the cover art and to upload it on Amazon, like a hybrid publisher would do for you, um, that's not the end of the road, and you can't expect that you're just going to sell a million copies, because nobody knows that you exist. And
Hmm.
honestly, it's not just something unique to writers. I think anyone who has a business or a product that they're trying to sell, you have to be willing to market it. You have to put in the time to try to get people to find it. And then it's not just finding your book, it's, are they willing to, can you grab their attention long enough to read the synopsis, and then are they willing to go buy it, and then are they willing to read it, and then are they willing to review it? So there's so much in the process that, going back to your original question, it was like, okay, I finished the book, it's all done, I've published it, now what? And
Hmm.
it just doesn't, you know if you're expecting that you're just going to sell thousands of copies right out of the gate, that's really not very realistic. And a lot of people get really, they get frustrated and depressed about it. But you just have to stick with it and just think long term. I know for me, I'm what they consider a low content writer because I only
Hmm.
have 2 books out. And but my hope is that I'm just building. I don't. And my advice, spoken to a couple of writers clubs and groups,
Hmm.
and I talk about not worrying about your current position, but focus on your trajectory. Are
Hmm.
you moving towards your goal with everything that you do? So don't get bogged down in right now that, hey, I'm not selling any books, but what are you doing to help yourself long term, to help people find you? And then as you add more books to your catalog, that's how you build those repeat customers.
Hmm. Something you have on your website that I think spoke to me is that you try to market to readers and not other authors, readers who are ready to buy. I think that's such a great advice because I see a lot of authors kind of have like a circle of friends and they just kind of go in circles, and which is fine. I mean, but I think finding readers to build that base is kind of the long term
Yeah.
goal.
And I'm sure it's probably taboo to say, I have a Facebook page as well as a website. I was on Twitter and Instagram, but I wasn't really finding it helpful because
Hmm.
you see a lot of, especially on Instagram, there was a lot of like authors saying, well, hey, if you follow me, I'll follow you. And they were doing that because of traditional publishers want you to bring a following before they'll consider your book. But the bottom line is, yeah, we might be following each other, but are you buying my book?
Yeah.
And that matters more. They want the
Hmm.
traditional publisher. I think that's something that's changed probably within the last 5 years. Is when I published Steal the Reaper, um, I still had an interest in being traditionally published, but I talked to several publishers, and one in particular was interested in my book, but she said, the only way that I can publish your book is if you unpublish it and change the name.
Hmm.
And because they didn't want any history of this book, and they did not want to, when book 2 came out, they didn't want to buy into a series that was already 2 books deep. So
Hmm.
that's just something else to think about is, with, trying to gain a following, how are you, how is that going to help you reach your goals? And, and know, like I was saying, the traditional publishers, I think that view towards self-published authors is changing because they're
Hmm.
realizing that, they can't afford to not consider a self-published author, especially if it's a really good book. So there are legal ways that you can go about, um, taking a self-published book and being picked up by a traditional publisher. It can be done. I think the industry was against that early on, but now that self-publishing is so popular, I think the traditional publishers are changing their view on that.
Yeah, you see a lot of the not even only winners, but also just books that are submitted to like the SPFBO and competitions like that. They'll get picked up. Even books that are just in the running that get a good following,
True.
they'll pick them up. So it's good to get that exposure.
Hmm.
And so with on your and a great website, by the way, I'm a big fan
Oh,
of
thank
the
you.
website. It's great to have a nice other website, but on the blurb, it's Tom Clancy meets Star Wars. And I know you're a self-proclaimed Star Wars geeks. What is it about Star Wars that you love so much?
Oh, well, when Star Wars originally came out in 77, um, the funny thing was is when that movie came out and I was a little kid, I was always bummed because all my friends had seen it before me. And so when we were playing the different characters, I always had to be R2D2. And I was like, you know, he has no arms and he just kind of stands there the whole time. But I certainly captivated by the visual experience.
Hmm.
The opening of Star Wars Episode 4, um, where the stormtroopers capture the rebel ship and the stormtroopers break through the door and there's the big gunfight and Darth Vader appears. To me, that was my favorite part of the movie. I've always loved stormtroopers, even though they get kind of a bad rap. But early, then the first two movies, stormtroopers were really cool, and I loved stormtroopers where they just they were relentless the way that they invaded that ship. And but then when The Empire Strikes Back came out, to me that movie just kind of took it to a whole new level. And
Hmm.
that's where you really see the character development and the richness of the story, um, that just totally captivated me, and it influenced. I was more into art, and I was an animator, and so it really influenced me visually. Um, and then and so I read Star Trek books as well and watched the movies and loved those. But it wasn't until a friend turned me on to The Hunt for Red October that I got into techno thrillers, and I really enjoy that genre.
Huh.
So that's kind of how I ended up meshing the two, sci-fi and techno thriller.
Nice. What are your thoughts on the current state of the Star Wars universe?
Um, well, again, I'm trying not to sound cynical or anything. Honestly, I have been turned off by it.
Hmm.
Um, I loved Andor, that
Yeah.
series, and I loved Rogue One.
Hmm.
I grew up with the original trilogy, so I was very partial to that. Um, I love the Clone Wars cartoon series. I thought that was really well done, and also the Bad Batch. But there are other shows I've really been disappointed with, quite honestly, and
Hmm.
so that's just me. I mean, I know other
Yeah.
people just love those shows and everything, and more power to them.
Yeah. Oh, I loved Andor. I'm a big fan of Rogue One too. So,
Yeah. So.
yeah, some great stuff in Andor for sure.
Mhm.
Um, for I guess swinging back to into writing, but what are things that you look for in beta readers? To have the reader feedback to help kind of polish the book. What do you look for in a beta reader?
Sure. Well, one is it somebody that's actually going to read your book and be willing to provide constructive feedback. I think that's something too that I would encourage authors to take advantage of, because um, my motto is, every baby is ugly at the start, and
It's true.
if you think that your book is perfect out of the gate, I think you're really doing yourself a disservice.
Hmm.
And there could be typos, and I can't even tell you how many times I have um, edited my book, and always I find something new that I would change. It's very tough as an author to let go of your baby and say this is the best that I can do for right now.
Hmm.
But if you stop at that point, that's where I think the self-published authors kind of draw criticism that is justified. And so I certainly recommend beta readers and hiring an editor, because not only am I looking for someone who will give me constructive feedback on um, the plot and the story arc, and are there any gaps that I'm missing, something, plot holes, if you will, that would cause a lot of embarrassment. So I'm looking for someone who will read it and really, I relish their feedback, and even
Mm.
if they're just like you really missed the ball right here, or dropped the ball, and or they point out my editor is very good at finding the grammar and the spelling mistakes, because that's not my strong suit. Um, but also just my wife and daughter especially are both English majors who
Oh,
read a lot of books, and so getting, especially with those two, um, reading my books, in book one especially, I have a female protagonist, and so there's just certain things that they're going to relate to and point out to me, especially my daughter, because she read Steal the Reaper the first time, and referred to my character Ava. She goes, "Dad, come on, you got to make her more of a badass." So you can bleep that out if you need to. But
no, you're fine.
she was the one who just said, Todd, Dad, you're getting, you need to look at this character deeper, and really, always remember that this is an Air Force pilot. She didn't get to that position. She's the captain of an aircraft. She didn't get to that position by being weepy, and um, she's vulnerable for sure, and she faces a lot of adversity. But there were just a few moments where my daughter would point out and say, "No, that's not the way Ava would respond in that
Mm.
situation." So getting that kind of feedback was critical, and I think in the long run made my book much better. And then I was able
Mm.
to kind of carry that over into book two.
Oh, nice. And I know you don't have you don't doing a whole lot of reading, but what was the last book that you read and really enjoyed?
Mm. I'm currently reading Sandstorm by James Rollins. I discovered
Mm.
him. I read his book, The Sixth Extinction, and wanted to go back and read all of them. So he's got a big catalog of books that I really enjoy. Let's see. I'm looking at trying to remember. I read Mark Greaney. So he kind of took over from Tom Clancy's Gray Man series.
Mm.
Um, Command Authority is one of my favorite books that he wrote. And let's see, let me look on my wall here. Um, I read Clive Cussler a lot when I was growing up.
Mm.
Michael Crichton was a big influence on me. So, yeah. I can't remember the last book I read all the way to the end. That's the difficult thing, is like I would start a book, and maybe have like three going at the same time to find one that really gripped me. But then as I started writing my book, the first book, I really um, made a commitment to myself that I wasn't going to get distracted by other things. And I think it's important to always be reading, and I read books now basically learning the craft from that author. I'm reading the story and enjoying it, but I'm also taking note of how they handle a certain situation. And
Mm.
so, whether, like I said earlier in the show here, we were talking about watching TV and movies and studying the craft that way. So definitely, I wish I read more, but as I'm writing my own book, I'm deep into book three right now. I just don't have the time to read other
Yeah.
people's work, but um, yeah, I still find myself going to the bookstore and buying books that are sitting on my shelf waiting to be read. So
Oh, I can relate to that for
yeah,
sure. Well, I just have a couple more questions for you.
sure.
One of the some questions I like to ask all of my guests is: was there ever a hobby or thing that you were excited to try, but when you tried it, you did not enjoy it?
Hmm. Well, I always wanted to play the bass guitar.
Hmm.
I love the bass, and so when my kids were younger, my daughter was taking piano lessons, and so I decided to buy a bass guitar, and we would go to music lessons together, and she would go to her piano instructor, and I had this guy. He was actually the lead guitarist of a local band that are pretty
Hmm.
big here in the Midwest, and so he taught guitar lessons in his free time, and he was so good, but I was just he was trying to get me to relax, and I just, as an adult, it was just really hard to learn an instrument, and I regret not doing it when I was young, because I think it
Hmm.
comes to you a lot faster, and it was just hard for me to um, devote the time to really learn that instrument, and I ended up selling it because I was like, I needed to be out moving more, and because if I was writing and working, and so I ended up selling it, and buying a bicycle, because I always loved riding my bike, and so but that would probably be one thing that I hated to sell that guitar, because I loved it.
Hmm. Second question is, if the zombie apocalypse started today, what would be your weapon of choice?
Ooh, I mean, everybody wants Daryl Dixon's crossbow, right? Um,
Could be.
um, ooh, you got and a katana would certainly come in handy, right? Um,
Quiet,
yeah.
no
Although,
ammo.
yeah, it depends if it's the kind of zombie that you have to hit in the head, or you know, maybe, I mean, with a bullet, that's kind of hard to do. So I'd probably go with a sword. Yeah.
Yes. It seems like the most popular choice. Swords, or like a baseball bat or a spear or something.
Yeah. Good question.
Yeah, the distance. So the last question I have for you is, what was your first job, and what did you learn from it that has taken you has kept coming back through your life?
Yeah. Well, my first job was a paper route. And so I was in seventh grade, and so many lessons learned from that. Um, you're learning financial management, you're learning time management, getting up early has never been a problem for me. I usually don't stay up late either. So I think that was just something that was ingrained early on, and but having that freedom that came with earning my own money at that age. I had a best friend who, we lived in the same neighborhood, and so I had my paper route, and his paper route was right next to mine, and so we would usually see each other, at 6 in the morning, wave hello, and then we would go back to our homes and then meet up to go walk to school, and but we would have money in our pockets, so we went to a local bakery every morning, and just having the freedom to do that was building that independence, and I think that it has followed through that work ethic throughout my life, especially writing a book. It takes a lot of dedication and a lot of brain power um, to stop and then pick up the next day where you left off, but try to keep your story moving seamlessly. And so that stopping and starting is quite challenging, especially, my books are about 190,000 words. So there's a
Mhm.
lot going on, and how do you keep that going? You really have to stay committed to it, and I hope that anybody listening to this will that wants to write a book, I say go for it. Make that dream happen, and commit yourself every day to writing something. People have asked, if I have like a word count every day, and I don't. I just want to get something down, though. that was
Mhm.
advice I actually got from John Grisham
Oh,
in
nice.
an interview that he had done. And he said when he was writing his first book, um, it was all about just trying to get something down every day and building that habit. It didn't, if you wrote, um, you know, a paragraph or a page or maybe 5 or 10 pages, that's great. But just keep coming back to it, because before you know it, you're going to hit the end. So
Yeah.
as long as you just keep plugging away at it, eventually you're going to reach the end. And then once you have it in hand, then the editing comes much faster, and that's how you'll grow as an author.
Oh, really good advice. It is a lot of work. It seems like I don't know, but it seems like a lot of work, a lot of dedication.
Yeah, it is, but it's
Yeah.
it's rewarding, and again, I encourage anybody if they have that dream. It's funny because nobody knew that I was writing a book until it came out. And then all of a sudden, people were saying, "Oh, I've always wanted to write a book." And when I do these book shows, it's just fun, especially when young kids come up and I've met some kids that have won writing contests, and they get to go to a university like over the summer for a program, and it's fun just to see them light up, and they have this story in their head that they want to tell, and other people do too. And I just say, just keep at it, pursue that goal, and you never know where it'll lead.
Yeah. Very good advice. But thank you, Todd. I really appreciate your time. Thanks for coming by to chat with me. But if someone wants to find you or your work, where's the best place to find you?
Well, definitely, they can find me on my website, which is toddhosea.com. Hosea. You can find my books on Amazon and Barnes and Noble and elsewhere. Just Google me. I have a YouTube channel as well. I don't really do any like author talks or anything on my channel. Going back to my love of movies, I actually had always wanted to do movie trailers. That's
Oh,
what I
nice.
wanted to actually do. I wanted to go to Hollywood and make trailers back in the day. And so just recently I started making my own movie trailers just for fun. Because, like I said, especially after I finished my second book, I did not want to write anything. I was just burnt out. And but I wanted to do something creative just to keep those juices flowing, and so I just started making my own movie trailers and having fun with it. And it was enough to kind of get that out of my system, and then refocus and start working on book 3. And so, yeah, so hopefully next year that'll be out.
Nice. Yeah, and I'll be sure to leave all the links in the description for the episode. So go by and check it out. But thanks again, Todd.
Thanks for having me, Steve. It was good to meet you, and I appreciate our talk.
I hope to do it again soon.
Absolutely.